Greetings, Hare Krishna. Good morning to all of you. I'm very happy to be able to speak to you today on a very important subject about spiritual intelligence and its connection to the overall well-being of every individual. Recently, a week ago, I heard the Chief Justice of India speaking at a function in Hyderabad, and he was saying that modern education is stressing too much on the utilitarian aspect of life, and there is very little stress on the education very less stress on the character development of a student. Actually, it is a character of a person that helps him to respond to certain situations which are very tempting, to which he has to say no. Characters are built out of fundamental values of life. And when there is no training of the individual in the society during his childhood, either through his family or through his community or through the teachers in the school, then the person does not develop an all-rounded personality. He will not be able to develop a character which actually comes from spiritual intelligence. There are different kinds of intelligences. Material intelligence, which are unlimited types, mathematical intelligence, language intelligence, linguistic intelligence, etc., etc. Right? Emotional intelligences. But today we're going to talk about spiritual intelligence. So the spiritual intelligence is actually the highest intelligence, highest of all the intelligence. Spiritual intelligence is the intelligence of all intelligences. It is by spiritual intelligence that we are able to guide all the other intelligence for our own good as well as good of the society. Because intelligence is something which is very powerful. Just like a sword, a sharp sword or a knife is powerful to cut, either for good or for bad. So, spiritual intelligence is something that handles the sharp material intelligence too. Misuse of material intelligence can bring great harm to the society. Misuse of technology against fundamental values of life can create havoc in the society. Powerful things like money in the hands of people who do not have spiritual intelligence can harm themselves and harm the entire society. So spiritual intelligence is the intelligence of intelligence, all the intelligences. Basically, intelligence itself means it's a directional knowledge. How to achieve something, how to get from point A to B, how to achieve happiness in life. This is spiritual intelligence. How to make choices in life that is best for my overall well-being. Without spiritual intelligence, we'll be simply driven by the immediate urges of our body, our mind, our senses, which may not be good for my spirit. The Vedic paradigm of a human being, a human being is expected to respond to different situations in life based on a long-term benefit. And this is called Shreyas. Shreyas means when I take a decision, I just don't go by what is the immediate short-term benefit. That short-term benefit is called prayers. So in order to make choices in our life, daily choices in our life, between Shreyas and prayers, spiritual intelligence is very essential. The animals do not have this spiritual intelligence. They simply go by the immediate instincts. The animals, their instincts, largely physical instincts, eating, sleeping, mating, defending, ahara, nidra, bhaya, maituna. These are the four instincts of an animal. Of course, human being is also an animal, but he is more than an animal. So the animals don't make any choices or decisions based on Shreyas. This special quality of spiritual intelligence is endowed in the human form of life, so that he can better negotiate a life of long-term well-being, long-term health for his total self. Now the self is not just the physical body. Our self is a totality of many components of the self. So I have emotions, I have physical body, then I have emotions, then I have a intellect, then I have a social ego. Then beyond all that, I am the spirit, the immortal spirit in this body, who is driving this body. So only by a proper training is it possible for a person to make meaningful choices for his long-term well-being. And when he is trained with qualities of discipline, patience, tolerance, austerity, learning through self-correction, when he applies his spiritual intelligence with these qualities, he develops something called samskaras. Samskaras are automatic responses to different situations based on spiritual intelligence. And spiritual intelligence obviously is based on character, and character is based on values. So unlike the animals, we have got a very special faculty to make choices between what decision to take when I am faced with different kinds of urges, my bodily urges, sensual urges, my emotional urges, my intellectual urges, curiosity, how far it should go. Everything needs a control. So the controller of all these different selves is the spirit self, the eternal, immortal self. In the Bhagavad-Gita, Krishna says that you are the Dehi. That means you are situated in this body. And this body is the Deha. Deha is the body. So I am situated. I am not this body, but I am the person who manages this body. So manages this body for what? There are three deep instincts of every spirit. His instincts are instincts for existence, knowledge, and bliss. He's always seeking these three kinds of rasas, or eternity, knowledge, and bliss. And many of these things are expressing, these instincts are what expresses itself through our bodily desires, emotional desires, intellectual desires. They're all meant to satisfy my deepest quest or instinct, deepest hunger for Sat, Chit and Ananda. So, this intelligence that is required to make choices between Shreyas and Prayas, short-term gain and long-term benefit, is only available for the human form, plus it is also only the zero level spiritual intelligence. It's a basic spiritual intelligence. Because life, everyone is trying to seek happiness, get power, knowledge, love. He's trying to maximize these things. That's what is happening in this world. Everyone is trying to maximize his happiness. And in the process, he also has to face negatives. He's tried to succeed, but he'll fail. He tried to be happy, but he has to sometimes experience distress. Sometimes fame comes, sometimes infamy comes. So, there are desirables and undesirables. They're inevitable in life. One has to face these things. No one's life is full of desirables. There are undesirables. But these things have to be handled. It is not in life you only handle happiness, you only handle success, you only handle fame. No, you have to handle both. This also requires spiritual intelligence. If one does not have spiritual intelligence to handle the dualities of this life, success, failure, pleasure, pain, fame, infamy, all these dualities, if one does not have the spiritual maturity, then his situation is not a comfortable situation. We can say that he does not have a healthy self. So, the basic level of intelligence, spiritual intelligence, is the need for self-control, to seek longer benefit than shorter benefit, along with the intelligence to handle the dualities of life. If a person is only thinking of success, or in his childhood he has been only trained into success, he never got trained to how to handle failure, then when some big failure comes, he is unable to handle, his mind is unable to handle. This requires spiritual intelligence, spiritual maturity, understanding the realities of life, that this life is full of dualities itself is a matter of spiritual intelligence. A person who has such spiritual intelligence does not expect that life is going to be always rosy. So he courageously, he knows the reality, he faces the reality. That requires spiritual intelligence. Now, apart from this, there's a higher kind of, even a higher spiritual intelligence. As I said, this is all zero level intelligence, how to handle our material life. There is a higher spiritual intelligence which is arising out of questioning. That is called Brahma Jijnasa. That is about questioning the very purpose of life. Asking question, who am I? If I am a spirit being, what is the nature of the spirit? What brings, overall well-being of the spirit? Who am I? Knowledge of God. I am seeking knowledge of God. I seek spiritual power to control myself. Unconditional love. How? Where can I find unconditional love? These kind of questions, they result in, the answers to this result in higher spiritual intelligence. In the Bhagavad-Gita, the early part of Bhagavad-Gita is actually introducing, Bhagavad-Gita is a universal knowledge, book of universal knowledge. It is not a sectarian teaching. So in the beginning part of Bhagavad-Gita, the early chapters of Bhagavad-Gita talks about this first kind of zero level spiritual intelligence which I spoke about, the intelligence to have self-control, to tolerate the urges of the senses, keeping in mind the long-term benefit for the soul, for the self, for the spirit. These are all described in the early chapters of Bhagavad-Gita. Then the higher spiritual intelligence are spoken by Krishna in the later chapters about the nature of the self, nature of the spirit, and then knowledge about God. These things are all given in the later chapters of Bhagavad-Gita. So basically, the spirit that is there in the human body is very specially endowed, and it is having a high potential to have a much higher quality of life than an animal. The soul, the spirit inside the animal body and the human body is same. The spirit in the animal does not have this quality to pursue shreyas. The human consciousness is much more evolved than in the animal body. So, as I mentioned, if somebody does not have spiritual intelligence, he does not develop spiritual intelligence, and if it does not develop character, and if it does not develop samskaras out of those character, then he is living a life almost like an animal. It may be polished. Eating, sleeping, mating, defending. The dog may be eating in the street. An uncivilized person with no spiritual intelligence will be, maybe he's externally eating from an air-conditioned dining table, sitting in an air-conditioned room on a dining table, but the pleasure of eating is the same, of that of the dog and him. Same thing with sleeping, with sex, with fighting. Dogs fight over territories, right? The spirit of that fight is, what is the difference between, different nations are fighting over territories too. So basically, if the human being is limiting, he has got 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, and all the years of his life. If he is spending his life only in these basic animal propensities of eating, sleeping, mating, and defending, then he is wasting his human form of life, which is so precious that by way of cultivating spiritual intelligence, it is possible for him to realize his highest potential as a pure Satchit Ananda entity. So this is something which one misses out if a human being misses out, if his focus, if some time is not given in his life to deal with his spirit, to feed his spirit, to feed his spiritual self. Now let us see the Bhagavad-Gita. In the Bhagavad-Gita, from the paradigm of Bhagavad-Gita, let us understand what is the overall self. Because today I am just going to talk about the overall well-being of a person. Overall well-being does not mean only bodily well-being, not only emotional well-being, not only intellectual well-being. It's very interestingly, Krishna gives us a model of what is self in the Bhagavad-Gita, and let us understand that. Let's have the starting point of our discussion from that. So we see that we have a physical body, Deha. Then there is also an emotional body, Manas. And then Buddhi is an intelligence body. And Ahankara is a social body. And Atma is a spiritual body. So if you see, I have my external body. And usually we generally think that, okay, this external body is material body, matter. But as far as emotion, intelligence, social, ego, these things are all, they are all spiritual, you think. But it's not true. What Krishna says is that there are two parts to this self. One is the spiritual part, the other is a material self. The material self consists of Deha, Manas, Buddhi, Ahankara. And the spirit part consists of the spirit who is driving this material self. So there, in other words, when we should not perceive ourselves as merely as body. We have different bodies. Some bodies cannot be seen. Physical body can be seen. But the fact that other bodies exist is very easily seen when we notice and observe that just like this physical body has pain and pleasure, our subtle body, our manas, has its own pain and pleasure. Buddhi has its own pain and pleasure. Ahankara has its own pain and pleasure. Atma too has its own pain and pleasure. They're different. We'll see that now. Next, we see, physical body is straightforward. There's physical pain, physical pleasure. It always seeks physical pleasure, avoids physical pain. Or it seeks in physical sense pleasures and sense pains. It avoids. It's interesting that the same kind of seeking pleasure and avoiding pain is observed even with our emotional body. We all have an emotional body unseen. That's called the mental body. And what is the pleasure for the mental body? Respect, appreciation, love, kindness, etc. So many like this. Just to give you an example, somebody abuses you, emotionally, your body gets pained. Criticism, it pains your emotional body. Hatred, somebody hates you, you get pained. Somebody behaves rashly with you, you get pained. So in this way, you can see clearly that there are desirables and undesirables in the emotional body also. Next, we have this intellectual body. Next, we have intellectual body, which has got its own intellectual pleasures and intellectual pains. Intellectual pleasures is understanding. When you understand something, you feel good. When you understand the purpose of something, you feel good. When you acquire knowledge, you feel good. When there is clarity in something, your intellectual body feels good. So these are all feel goods of the intellectual body. Similarly, there are in not so feel goods of the misunderstanding, purposelessness, ignorance, confusion. These are all the pains of the intellectual body. So our tendency is always to seek pleasure and avoid pain. So we seek emotional pleasure, we avoid emotional pain. Somebody who is, let us say, who is constantly abusing you, you are not interested in going near him. You avoid him. Why? Because instinctively you seek emotional pleasure. Similarly, intellectual pleasure. You are anxious to go and learn from somebody who knows everything in a particular subject. So you like to go. So you like the desirables and there are undesirables. Next. Then there is the ego body. Ego body deals with power, success, high social position, fame, etc. These are desirable. It will immediately make you feel good. But when you feel powerlessness, when you face failure and very low position in the society and infamy, if somebody who is famous suddenly, his fame he is to face infamy, it is pain. These are all pains of the ego body. So it's very important for us to learn. First part of spiritual intelligence is to learn that these are the different components of the self. The total self constitutes the combination of all this. What is it? Physical self, emotional self, intellectual self, social ego self, and finally the spirit self, the soul. This is spirit, all others are material. This is spirit. Now, go to the next slide. This is exactly what Krishna says in the Bhagavad-Gita. Indriyani parani ahur indriyabhyaha param manaha manasastu para buddhir yo buddhe partastu saha. The working senses, the body, are superior to dull matter. Mind is higher than the senses. Intelligence is higher soul than mind. And he is even higher than intelligence. Now, very important information is being given by Krishna. Yes, there are different selves. But among these, there is a hierarchy of selves. There is a lowest self, which is the physical self, the emotional self, the intellectual self, the ego self, and finally he, the soul itself, he is the highest self. And Krishna gives us this information. This is the model of the self that Krishna reveals in the early part of the Bhagavad-Gita itself. And then, very clearly, he explains that the soul or the spirit or you are not the material self, but it is a temporary self. It's your temporary self. Your soul is your eternal self. Next. Now, he gives us a secret. Now, as I explained, body has its demands for pleasure, mind has its demands for pleasure, intellect has its demand for pleasure, social ego has its demands for pleasure. But the one who controls all these things is the spirit. So when each of these bodies are urging for pleasure, then who has to take a decision on that? It is the spirit. It is a spiritual self which has to take the decision whether I should allow this gratification or no. And to control that, Krishna gives the secret. Knowing oneself to be transcendental to material senses, mind and intelligence. That means the spirit self is the highest self in this body. All others are lower selves. Bodily self, mental self, intellectual self, social self, these are all lower selves, subordinate to the spirit self. One should control the lower self by the higher self, and thus by spiritual strength conquer this insatiable enemy known as lust. Next. The spiritual ego body needs spiritual intelligence. For what? For various things it needs spiritual intelligence. You imagine that if you don't have this kind of spiritual intelligence, then at different, especially at critical junctures of life, will not be able to make intelligent choices that is ultimately good for my well-being, my total well-being. The lowest body is the physical body. Emotional, mental body is higher than physical body. Intellectual body higher than both physical and mental body. And social body is even higher than the above three. And the spiritual body is even the higher self than all the lower selves. So you see, often we come under great conflict. The body wants something. Emotions want something which is contradictory. Or the intelligence says, no, it doesn't fit into my scheme of things. You don't indulge in this. A social body will say, no, this is going to hurt me. It's going to hurt my image. I don't want to do this. So each of these bodies have its own prompts. And finally the decision has to be made by the spiritual ego body. And the spiritual ego body can do this. To do something, to make a choice, you need intelligence. And spiritual intelligence is the intelligence of the spirit to make choices to the demands put before it by the physical body, emotional body, intellectual body, and social body. Spiritual body also needs spiritual intelligence for self-control. Spiritual intelligence is required to be aware and control that lower body does not indulge in a feel-good by sabotaging the feel-good of all higher bodies to it. A self-awareness. Suppose your body demands, oh, I want to excessively eat something very tasty. Okay, it's a lower body, it is one of the senses the tongue wants to enjoy. But even physical body itself, within the physical body itself, you will see that there is awareness that no, if I unrestrictedly satisfy my taste, my stomach may not be all right. So he has to reconcile. He has to ensure that the lowest, let's say that his sense of tongue, his tongue does not indulge in a manner in which his physical well-being itself is hurt. So this is the meaning of, suppose you eat unrestrictedly, you're sabotaging your own body. You'll be sick. You'll have to experience the consequences of that. So one has to be very aware. Self-awareness is very much essential to see the demands that are raised by all the material self, starting from the physical self, senses, and the emotional self. Yeah, emotions can go berserk. It can demand, unreasonably, can become obsessive with some things, and then it is going to hurt. It is hurt your intellectual body. It will hurt your physical body. It will hurt. In other words, each of these four bodies, they have to cooperate with each other. One cannot sabotage somebody else's well-being. So the pleasure permitted by each body should be in harmony with the pleasures of the higher body. So it's a hierarchy of self that Krishna revealed. Yes. Emotional body has to control has to the physical needs of the body has to be in conformity with one's emotional needs. The emotional needs has to be in conformity with his intellectual needs. His intellectual needs have to be in conformity with his social needs. And his social needs should be in conformity with his spirit needs. So the purpose percolates down, and that becomes a basis for spiritual intelligence to make. That spiritual intelligence becomes the basis for the spirit to make intelligent choices to deal with the different urges of the body. And what are the consequences if it does not have the spiritual intelligence? Result is he will suffer from ill health. It may be ill health of the physical body. It may be ill health of the emotional body, ill health of the intellectual body, ill health of his social body. As we said, well-being, all-round well-being of all the lower bodies and the spirit body is considered to be the overall well-being. It's just like there is a CEO. The soul is like the CEO. The spirit is like the CEO in this body. And all others are staff working under him for his purpose. For my purpose, because ultimately the soul is the experiencer of Sukha and Dukkha. So for my purpose, all these are working. But now it should not happen that if I don't have self-control, my lower body, my staff who are supposed to work for me, from the company, they'll make me work for them. That means I become a servant of the urges of the lower body. I become a servant of my emotional needs. Rather than emotional needs satisfying my needs, the spirit's needs, in harmony with everything else. And so therefore, spiritual intelligence followed by self-control is very essential to see that there is harmony between all the lower selves. There is no conflict. Sometimes even a lower body can contribute for the pleasure of a higher body, then that is called austerity. One should accept it. So I may take physical austerity for the sake of my good, of higher good. I may sacrifice something. So the quality of sacrifice, austerity, self-control, self-awareness, these are all emanating from spiritual intelligence. Now, each of these bodies have their own individual urges and interests. Physical body seeks physical existence, bodily and sense pleasures, avoids physical pain. Emotional body seeks pleasant emotions and avoids unpleasant emotions. We are just observing what this whole system is about. It's not that it's any different in my body, your body, anybody's body. This is how the system is. Intelligence body seeks meaning of every situation, avoids ignorance of situations. Social body seeks power, control, success, social position, prestige, fame, avoids powerlessness, failure, and infamy. And spiritual body seeks permanency, self-knowledge, God knowledge, and eternal self-God relationship. So all these four bodies have to be harmonious with fulfilling the interests of the spiritual ego body. And then it results in overall well-being of the person. His total self is in harmony. His physical body is not fighting with the emotional needs. His emotional body is not fighting is not conflicting with the urges of the physical body. Similarly, each of this, they're all harmonious, means that one does not seek pleasure by sabotaging the pleasure of the other. And all of this, four layers of material self, they all serve the purpose of the spirit. Unfortunately, in the modern day human being is not told, taught, educated about the purpose of his spirit. Entire focus is on material success, and it's just blindly going after. And with material intelligence, yes, it's very possible to make a very good career, to succeed in making money, you succeed in so many material things. But the end of it, you'll see that he will feel emptiness, because all these things were pursued not in line, not in conformity with the deep need of the soul. Modern civilization, present civilization, right from the students, they're turning out individuals who are, as I said in the beginning, basically it is utility oriented. It is not based on any kind of higher principles of life. If I can manipulate matter better than somebody else, I am a better person. I am a more successful person. Not that if somebody is there and he is able to control his senses and control his ambitions and control his desires to be harmonious with his spiritual self, that has no value in modern society. But that alone is what really gives the inner satisfaction to an individual. So today is largely the world is after external achievements, an external life, a success in external life. But there is hardly anything, anybody is an average person of the modern world. Rare people are there, no doubt. But I'm not talking about the exemption. But the average person of this modern world is ignorant about his spiritual needs. And therefore, the depth of his existence, he is unhappy. He is ignorant. Why I am born? What should the purpose of the life? Nothing. He just runs like a mad race, how to succeed in giving, seeking power, control, success, social position, sense enjoyment, money, accumulating money, more and more money to get more and more sense objects. This is the situation of the modern day adults. Why? Because the degradation has begun much earlier in the education system. And today it's becoming worse. Why it is becoming worse? Because as I explained in the beginning, this spiritual intelligence and the character and the samskaras that come from this spiritual intelligence is all learnt through three different channels. One is in the family, another is in the community, and the third is in the school, from the teachers. Now, already long back, that role played by the teachers, role played by the school is already gone. Why? Because the teacher is under pressure, children are under pressure to simply spend all their time in loading information into their brains. There is hardly any kind of time for the child. There is hardly luxury of time for the teacher Even if a teacher wishes well to train the child into some values of character, values and character, is unable to. Ultimately, what is the result? These very same students have become adults and they have no qualities of patience, tolerance, no value for austerity, tapasya, no value. And everything that such an individual wants is based on immediate short-term benefit. And this is never going to satisfy the spirit. He himself does not know. He chases at the end of life. He realizes that I've chased everything, all these material things I've chased, but I never chased spiritual knowledge. I never chased who I am. I never chased what is death. Where did I come from? Why I am trapped in this body? All these questions are not asked. What is the real true nature? Because he is not the body, he is not the mind, he is not the intellect, he is the spirit. And he hardly is feeding the spirit. So modern individual is just like a bird in a cage. Lot of effort is put to paint the cage, decorate the page, everything. Decorate the cage very nicely. The bird is sitting inside the cage. The bird is not fed. The bird is starved. And therefore the bird is never happy. So externally the people of this modern world, they show I am happy, how are you, I am fine. They say happy. But there is a vacuum within, deep within him there is a vacuum because he himself has not established what is the purpose of my life. And based on that purpose of life, he is not made choices for his physical body, the emotional body, intelligence body, social body. He has not made the right kind of choices. He has got a lopsided development. Maybe he's achieved very high success, lot of money. But he cannot handle his own wife, children. There's no emotional intelligence. There's no emotional maturity. Or he does not know what to do with this money. He does not have the intelligence, a larger intelligence. How to use power for the good of humanity, for the good of his own self, in a long-term basis. All this is missing. So there is, in our tradition, Indian tradition, so much emphasis has been given to developing spiritual intelligence in the children. And this spiritual intelligence does not stop at the children or in the school. Continuously, life, one responds in life from birth to death based on the spiritual intelligence and the character that comes from that. And the resulting samskaras, which ultimately bring him peace and happiness. So only the spiritual intelligence can integrate all the needs of all the layers of the self. And that is exactly what, Krishna teaches in the Bhagavad-Gita. How one can, through self-management, management of this different self, one can ultimately do good to one's true self, which is the immortal self in this body, the immortal person in this body. So, this understanding of self that Krishna has revealed in the Bhagavad-Gita is something which is which if one understands, self-management becomes easy. And mind you, each of these emotional body, physical body, all of them, they're all bodies which learn. If the spirit teaches the emotional body something, You say, let us say there's a desire in the mind and you say no to it 5 times. The mind learns. 6th time you don't have to say no. It is got trained. That's called samskara. So our intelligence also, intelligence, mind, social body, all these things, they have a very powerful capacity to learn. That means you can teach them. If you teach, then it will, suppose say no to something 10 times to your, let us say, social ego, it will learn. That means it will develop a samskara to limit itself to this much. I should not go beyond this. So this also we should understand. This great potential of each of our self are trainable. By practice, you can teach good things, you can teach bad things. Repeatedly you act with character, you develop good habits. Without character, you develop bad habits. And once habits are there, they exercise a huge force on us, whether good or bad. Because we are the one who created these habits. If those habits, they support my spiritual well-being, it's very good. If it doesn't support, then through spiritual intelligence, I have to reverse that program. Through practice, I have to clean myself. I have to clean my emotional body. For instance, emotional body, love. Yes, cleanliness in love. Let's say in sex, with one's own, within the married life. One should not desire a woman outside his married life. It's unclean. Because it will bring problems. It may bring pleasant emotions to have, so many women around, your life. But it may be pleasant for your emotional body, but it is going to hurt your social ego. Even materially. Materially, one will hit the other. So self-management means that, no, for my short gun, for my narrow-minded, just for satisfying my emotional mind, I should not get into it. I should restrict. And he develops a samskara. He doesn't have to restrict himself every time. He doesn't have to restrain himself every time, because automatically his samskara has come where he doesn't think of enjoying or coveting any other woman than his own wife. So these are some of the things that these are very much in a Vedic Gurukula system. The children are taught all these things, which is now absent. Our whole Gurukula system has been destroyed by the Western education system. Now, what is the relationship of the individual with the universe? See, ultimately, what is the interest of this spirit? Interest of the physical body, interest of the mental body, we have discussed. Then what is actually the interest of the spiritual body? See, physical body is part and parcel of the total material, matter or Vishwarupa. Mental body is part of the universal mind. Because I am only having a small chunk of mind. You have your mind, he has his mind, there's a universal mind. Just like this physical body, some Panchabhuta I have taken, but out of total Panchabhuta. Similarly, a universal mind, from that a small chunk is my mind. Universal intelligence, small portion is mine. I am part and parcel. Similarly, so many egos are there, social egos. Your ego, my ego, and I am sharing one ego out of so many universal false egos. Now come to the spiritual self. The spiritual ego body is also part and parcel of an infinite supreme ego. That's Paramatma. Atma and Paramatma. Atma is the spiritual ego body. I am tiny, I am part and parcel of the supreme infinite ego. Now, this is where, show me the next slide. Krishna says, Sarva dharman parityeja mam ekam sharanam vraja aham tam sarva papebhyo moksheshyami ma suchaha. The soul will be happy when it surrenders to the supreme ego, which is Paramatma. When Atma surrenders to Paramatma, come to the next, previous slide. The complete being of Atma, the complete well-being of Atma happens when he works in cooperation with and dependence on Paramatma for his tiny desires that are harmonious. See, desires have to be harmonious. That means they have to be dharmic desires. Desires which are harmonious with the universal desires of Paramatma is called dharmic desires. And those dharmic desires, he works for those dharmic desires in cooperation and dependence of the Paramatma, then that is the complete well-being of the Atma. Then the Atma is completely happy. This requires, of course, practice of Bhakti Yoga, of surrender to Paramatma. Bhakti Yoga. Yoga means linking up Atma with Paramatma. There is a rapport between mind of the Atma and mind of the Paramatma. That is why, you see, this is called self-realization. We will be completely satisfied, not by satisfying only our material needs. Material needs may be required for existence. Material need may be emotional needs may be required in the family. Intellectual needs may be required. Social, ego needs may be required. But those all required in order to maintain a lifestyle that would support my realization of Paramatma. Does not matter. It does not, in order to realize Atma's relationship with Paramatma, does not mean that one has to renounce family, one has to renounce everything. No, that is a very, very naive idea. This is not recommended by Krishna in the Bhagavad-Gita. In fact, Krishna told Arjuna, don't run away from the battlefield, now you fight. So this is very important for us to understand that renunciation is different, detachment is different. We have to act in a detached way, detached from self-interest, but attached for the larger universal interest. That is the meaning of surrendering to Paramatma. So now this I kept it for the last, because if I tell in the beginning the pleasure and pain of the spiritual body, many won't understand, because everybody's spiritual ego body is practically sleeping. This is called the person that Jiva is in Maya. He is completely running after his material self. He is not even aware. So just see, the pleasure of the ego body, the spiritual pleasure, is remembering and reconnecting with the universal spiritual ego of Paramatma, of who he is part and parcel. And what is actually the pain? Everybody in this world is actually in spiritual pain, because he is deprived of his Satchit Ananda in association with Paramatma. Forgetting spiritual nature and satisfying his self with identifying his self with the material self, temporary self, that is the cause of all suffering. And therefore, the immortal self will never be happy unless it realizes its immortal self. Ultimately, we want the well-being of the immortal self. The immortal self will be, its well-being is taken care of when it connects itself with Paramatma. Does not matter, even if you are in this material body, you are in your profession, you are in your student life, you are in your work life, whatever may be in situation you are, those external situation is not a bar to re-establishing your inner life of your spiritual ego, connecting yourself with the Supreme Paramatma. And that is actually the ultimate purpose of spiritual intelligence, beginning with self. I told you, zero level spiritual intelligence to deal with dualities of life, to how to optimize the pleasures of all the lower bodies, From there, it goes finally to the spiritual, higher spiritual intelligence, that I am part and parcel. Because I cannot be disconnected. My body cannot be disconnected from this universe because I am connected. It's an organic whole. My mind is connected to your mind, everybody's mind. It's an organic whole. Intelligence also. Similarly, soul also is an organic whole. I am part and parcel of God. Mamai vamsha jiva loke jiva bhuta sanatana. So this is the situation. So with the little time that I have been given, 1 hour time, I have now touched upon some of the things that I wanted to, speak upon with respect to lack of a system in the modern world which existed once upon a time in our Sanatana Dharma, to gradually cultivate spiritual intelligence, character and samskara in an individual that is conducive for his ultimate connection with Paramatma.